Okay, well, hello everybody, and good morning or good afternoon to you, depending on where you are. I'd first of all like to thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to spend with M86 Security. This is our monthly webinar, and this month we're going back and reviewing the labs report from the second half of 2011. This webinar is being recorded, so all the attendees and anyone who is registered for the webinar will get a link to the actual recording. And we'll also be making the copy of the slides available to you, as well as a copy of the report, which is actually due to be released tomorrow morning. So you lucky folks are the first people to actually see the report, and you'll be able to download a copy. Okay, my name is Bradley Ansis. I'm the Vice President of Technical Strategy here at M86, and I'm very lucky to be able to speak on behalf of our security labs and all the great work that those guys do. And today, we'll go back and review some of the findings and some of the research that our security labs, our research guys, did in the second half of 2011. So in terms of the agenda, we're going to go through some of the key points. I'll just go through and summarize some of those. Then we'll jump into the actual statistics that we researched and summarized out of both malware, exploit kits, and also spam. And then we'll move on to some of the separate web and email threats themselves to go through and review some of what we thought were some of the more interesting topics during that 6-month period. If you have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate to ask them through the Q&A panel, and we'll try and catch them as we go. Or we'll pause at the end for any other questions that we need to cover. Okay, in terms of the actual key points, busy slide of text here, but I'm not going to go through every single one of those. One of the real key points, not just in the second half of 2011, but certainly, throughout 2011 was really the rise of targeted attacks. And certainly we saw those getting a lot more sophisticated and pursued, a far wider range of organizations during the second half of 2011. And we'll go back and review some of the more notable targeted attacks throughout that period a little bit later on in this webinar. One of the other things that also came out, which I have to boast about, that we predicted in our 2011 threat predictions back at the end of 2010, was the use of stolen or fraudulent digital certificates. And we will talk more about that as part of that webinar. Also, in several targeted attacks, malware was hidden by embedding itself in various file formats. So we'll go through and have a look at the growing sophistication of malware and how it's hiding within files. As the attackers are getting a lot more sophisticated in the ways they actually deliver and hide the malicious content, then the security products are having more of an issue trying to keep up with that. Perhaps one of the biggest stories of the second half of 2011 was the emergence of Blackhole, and we'll go through the statistics a little bit later on, but Blackhole is now by far the most dominant exploit kit in the marketplace, and we'll go through and discuss some of the reasons of that and go through and explain to you some of the new features, etc., that the bad guys are getting in their technology that they use against us. The other interesting point on the next slide is number 12. And that was the proportion of malicious spam that rose in the second half of 2011 from 1% to 5%. Now, that may not sound like a massive amount, but when you think about the overall volume of spam every day, and you're thinking about how malicious attachments, at some times peak to 20% of all spam, that's a massive change over where it's been before. Certainly it started with malicious attachments, so actual physical attachments that were malicious in the email messages, and then towards the second half of 2011, or towards the end of the actual year, moved more to the the embedded links within those messages. So changing from physical attachments to actually a blended threat attack. All right, so let's move on to some of the statistics that we've seen in 2011. So this is the world malware map. So what we're basically showing here is the distribution of malicious web content around the globe. And what it does is actually pinpoints the location of the server which hosts the actual exploit or the malicious content. Now, this is usually different from the location of the compromised server. Often pages on compromised servers only include an injected iframe that may point to the other malicious servers where the actual exploits reside. So you can see here that the US has the dubious honor of leading this significantly, with a little under half of all the malicious content hosted actually in the US. And drilling into the US, another interesting thing we did for this report is we looked at the individual states that have the most active malicious servers. And in decreasing order, they are Florida, California, Texas, and Washington. For example, in Florida, M86 Security Labs identified more than 15,000 web pages, all hosted in the Dania area of Fort Lauderdale. These are actually compromised in the same way, where a script was injected into the pages that redirects the browser to a website that distributes fake antivirus programs. In California and Texas, we found several websites hosting password stealers such as Cineworld. While in Belleville, Washington, several download websites served malware while presenting benign software names to users such as ZipNzip or Xvid software. Pulling up a bit to actual countries, Russia hosts the second largest number of malicious pages at 6%, well behind the US. But the high quantity of malicious servers located in this country is not surprising because several groups that author and distribute malware, including exploit kits, operate from Russia. In fact, 63% of the malicious content hosted in Russia is located in Moscow and its surrounding suburbs. So moving on to the most observed web exploits. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart for you, but these are the most observed vulnerabilities in the wild. And these percentages are all taken from the pages that contain web exploits as observed by our secure web gateway all over the world. So interestingly, the Microsoft Internet Explorer RDS ActiveX vulnerability that was disclosed in 2006 and patched in 2006 is still the most used vulnerability that we see around the world. But exploits in the second half of 2011, targeted a variety of products. And you can see these in the list here: Internet Explorer, Oracle Java, Microsoft Office products, and quite commonly Adobe Reader. And this really points out a continuous problem that we're seeing in the marketplace. Many users and organizations do not patch all their installed software in a timely manner, and attackers leverage this weakness to their advantage. And one thing that we're certainly noticing is the vulnerability antidote technology in our secure web gateway, which can help identify the attempted use widely used inside our customers. So certainly, while we don't suggest that we read workstations, you definitely still need to do that. It can certainly take some of the pressure off that continual updating and patching process. But here you can see I've highlighted 3 examples from 2006, 2002, and 2004 that have all been patched, and yet they're in the top 6 vulnerabilities that we've seen being used in the wild. And if they're being used in the wild, they're being used because they're successful. Also, the table shows more than half of the exploited vulnerabilities are used by the Blackhole exploit kit. Now, the Blackhole also exploits some additional vulnerabilities that are not on this top list, and we've got some more detail a little bit later on. But certainly, the majority of malicious pages that attempt to exploit vulnerabilities are part of well-organized exploit kits, and this is why we see them so often. These exploit kits are used by the attackers. It's kind of like their business intelligence or their business automation type of software. It's not as if the attackers are sitting there manually sending these emails or manually infecting these websites. It's all completely automated, and it's all controlled by that exploit kit. And Blackhole, as previously mentioned, is by far the most prevalent exploit kit that we're seeing at the moment. Here's a new piece of information that we issued in the second half of 2011, and this is the geographical distribution of web exploits. So the list of exploits in this chart only includes the most prevalent ones. For example, malicious URLs hosted in the US hosted in the US exploit approximately 30 different vulnerabilities, but here we're only showing the 8 most prevalent ones. Now, some of the interesting things here is that the malicious web content hosted in Western countries exploits a consistent set of vulnerabilities. And this can certainly be explained by the fact that most malicious web pages are distributed using exploit kits. And certainly, we've already talked about Blackhole. We see the difference when compared to China, where exploit kits are not commonly used. Exploits in China predominantly target Microsoft Internet Explorer, and this is most likely due to the popularity of old versions of Internet Explorer there, usually version 6. This means that many users in China are exposed to old vulnerabilities, and given the huge number of Internet users there, they've become an excellent target for attackers. So here we're looking at the most prevalent exploit kits. In the second half of the year, our security labs noted that Blackhole became the most prevalent exploit kit with a huge margin over the other kits. Even ones such as Incognito, Eleanor, and Phoenix, which were commonly used during the first half of the year. Those are now rarely used, and some other exploit kits such as Neurosploit, which was the most prevalent exploit kit in the previous period, were practically abandoned. So you can see the big difference here in the change on how popular the different exploit kits here, and Blackhole exploit kit now has a massive advantage over the actual exploit kits. The other interesting thing too is to see the actual distribution of the actual versions of the exploit kits. So certainly, with Blackhole, version 1.03 is certainly the most popular version, even though the latest version is 1.2. And then you can see the different exploit kits being used in different countries and different versions of those exploit kits. Now, 1.0.3 is the most commonly used one, and you can see it's very significant in the United States, where it's infected a large number of websites. Older versions of Blackhole are used because they've been leaked in private or public forums, and people don't wish to pay for the exploit kit, prefer using a free old variant. And also, an upgrade is not normally free, and cybercriminals often prefer not to upgrade unless it is significant. So it's all about making sure they're using the best software for their attacks. Okay, moving on to spam now. So the spam volume falls even more, and this is certainly the big story in the second half of 2011. So throughout 2011, the volume of spam continued to remain at low historic levels, and this really reflects a substantial change in the underground spamming ecosystem. Our proxy for spam volume movements is the Spam Volume Index, which tracks changes in the volume of spam received by a representative bundle of domains, basically our honeypots. So during mid-December 2011, the Spam Volume Index bottomed out at around 1,000, half of what it was in June 2010, and at the lowest level we've seen since 2007 when we started the Spam Volume Index. As we covered in our first half 2011 report, several factors led to the slump in volumes at the end of 2010. Most significantly, Spamit.com, an underground affiliate program that several spamming botnets used, was shut down in late September 2010. Spamit.com was linked closely to Canadian Pharmacy and other brands of bogus online pharmacies. Also, several botnet disruptions impacted spam production, including the Mega D, Rustock, and Kilohost botnets. Later in 2011, spam volume fell away again as output from the Exasta botnet dropped in August, and similarly Mazdan spam fell away in October. So as the volume of spam fell, the percentage of spam and total inbound email dropped from approximately 90% in September 2010 to approximately 70% in December 2011. So big change there. So although lower spam output is welcome news, spam tool still makes up a major percentage of total inbound email and is increasingly malicious, as we'll cover a little bit later on in the report. And as such, spam still remains a significant threat for most organizations. Just got a question that's coming in here. As far as phishing and spam is concerned, will we see a DMARC module or an add-on in MailMarshal SNSP SEG to battle this threat by consolidating SPF and DKIM? That is certainly a very good question, and it's something we're actually looking at. The real shame of SPF and DKIM is the low adoption levels. And certainly, if every single email sender, every single organization with an MX record in the world adopted these standards, then, they could make a pretty big impact. At the moment, we're just seeing exactly how that goes and if we're going to get the demand in, but I'll certainly pass that comment on to our product manager for MailMarshal. So thank you for that question. So in terms of the actual spam botnets, and here is the most popular spam botnets and how they've changed over the first half of 2011. So of course, the bulk of spam today is emitted from botnets, and these are networks of computers compromised by malware. So we monitor the spam output from major botnets by observing infected machines in a closed environment, and then comparing that behavior with the incoming spam feeds to gauge the activity levels of each botnet. So the spamming botnets are constantly in flux, reflecting the nature of the underground marketplace. Botnets morph, become obsolete, are replaced, taken down and upgraded in response to market forces, competition, and law enforcement. As of December 2011, the top 8 spamming botnets were responsible for 90% of spam monitored by our security labs. While all the spam output from different botnets fluctuated throughout 2011, most noticeable is that there are no substantial newcomers on the block. All the top spamming botnets are familiar and have been around for some time, even in a constantly morphing form. So finally, we have the spam categories. No big changes here. The top four spam categories are similar to what we saw in the first half of the year, namely pharmaceutical at 47%, replicas at 13%, and gambling at 12%, dating at 12% also. These categories reflect the availability and the attractiveness of the various marketing affiliate programs that spammers join to make money. And you can, for more information on affiliate programs, we've got a great white paper on our lab's website all about affiliate programs. So one noticeable trend is the rise of malware-related spam in the second half of the year. Our security labs observed a large increase in malicious spam with exploit attachments in August and September. Compared to earlier in the year, this was a massive surge from less than 1% of total spam to more than 20% at its peak. After November, when this initial wave decreased, we began to see increased volumes of blended threats and malicious spam, this time with hyperlinks or embedded links leading to the malware exploit kits. Towards the end of 2011, these malicious campaigns represented 5 to 10% of total spam, and we'll look at this subject in more detail a little bit later on. All right, so those are the statistics. So what we'll do now is we'll move on to the individual web and email threats that we've been observing in the second half of 2011. So the first one we have here is the fake social media spam is certainly on the rise. And this is where we see, spam messages or malicious campaigns mimicking, the social media notifications that we commonly get. So here you can see an example from LinkedIn, an example from YouTube. So during the later months of 2011, we saw a noticeable increase in the number of spam campaigns that are mimicking these notifications. Spammers desperate for hits are increasingly disguising their messages to dupe users into clicking on the links inside the messages. So these campaigns also highlight another technique now typical of spam campaigns, and that's the use of hacked but otherwise illegitimate websites to host tiny HTML pages that do nothing other than redirect the browser to the final destination. In this case, the dubious Toronto drugstore. Sounds a lot like the Canadian pharmacy that we've seen in yesteryear. So spammers have sizable networks of these compromised sites, and this is really evidenced by the large range of fresh sites being used every day. The inserted HTML page names typically follow the format single word .html, and in the example that you can see here in the image, you can see the indexing.html and the constructible .html. So these are examples of those single redirecting pages on these infected websites. So the cyber criminals use this technique to get around URL domain blacklists, which are less likely to blacklist legitimate or long-standing domains. The hacked websites tend to be smaller and less popular and have been compromised because they are purely secured, either by having the FTP credentials guessed or stolen or being vulnerable to attack, for example, WordPress, Tim Thumb vulnerabilities, which is currently being exploited in a pretty big scale. So the next subject talks about the use of shortened URL links, so URL shorteners. So certainly we've seen this, steadily rising, and are now, up to about 10% of spam actually now uses a shortened URL instead of the complete URL. And obviously they do this to get around or making the actual embedded URLs a lot more difficult for the actual users to recognize. So instead of using well-known short URL services like tinyurl.com or bit.ly, spammers have taken to using obscure public services, and hundreds of these are available. Spammers have even started to build their own services from one of the many open source short URL scripts freely available on the web. And this latter approach guarantees service for the spammers, as they cannot be banned from their own service. On the other hand, that makes it relatively easy to actually blacklist an obscure short URL service if it's actually being abused. Now we're going to drill into more detail on the actual malicious spam campaigns. So some of the examples here, and you can see the massive spike that we noticed, midway through the actual second half of the year. So some of the most popular, organizations and themes that we've seen over the last 6 months are the NACHA, which is an Electronic Payments Association, the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FedEx and UPS, printer and fax scams. You can see the actual image there in the bottom right, an example of one of the printer and fax scams, Facebook friends, or electronic flight numbers. And as we highlighted earlier in the webinar, we saw huge games of spam with attached malware during this August and September time period. For the most part, this wave of malware consists of various downloaded Trojans that are assigned a range of names by AV engines such as Chetville or M86. While the malware constantly changes, the end goal does not. Once established on the system, the malware seeks to download other malware, including data stealers, fake AV, or spam bots. And compared with the relatively quietness earlier in the year, this wave of spam represented malware distribution on a massive scale. Despite the impressive volume, the wave did not last long. Beginning in November, there was a marked shift away from using email attachments to using links to malicious code hosted on the web. The themes stayed the same, for example, the ACH notifications, but the way the malware was delivered was different. So instead of having a physical attachment, they now went to having an embedded URL link within the actual message, as you can see in the example here. So as of late December 2011, 5 to 10% of all spam included these malicious links. In most cases, the links led via one or more redirects to a site hosting the Blackhole exploit kit. It rears its head yet again, which tried to exploit vulnerabilities on the user's system. Compared to attached malware, this type of attack makes it easier to compromise a user, as they only have to click on one link in a spam message, resulting in better infection rates for the actual cyber criminal. We also noticed a dip in fake antivirus following several arrests. So in recent years, fake AV or scareware has become a serious and growing threat. You can see an example of one of these applications on the slide. There are literally thousands of variants or skins of fake AV. Typically, they're spread by installer software or malware, should I say, like Virus, Chetville, and Celity, which at the same time often bundle other malware onto the system, such as data stealers like Zbot or spam bots like Cutwell. The modus operandi of fake AV is to scam people into making them believe their computers are infected. The malicious application then constantly annoys and pushes the user to purchase the AV software to clean non-existent threats on their system. And we've seen this around for several years now. However, in June of 2011, the FBI and other authorities disrupted 2 fake AV distribution networks and seized several computers and servers from different countries, including the US authorities in Latvia, also arrested 2 men allegedly behind the fake AV scheme. And at our security labs, we really noticed the effect of that disruption. We observed several malware families, including Celity, Bredolab, Chetville, and other Trojan downloaders known to download fake AV suddenly stopped distributing this scareware. Despite the welcome decline in fake AV, the industry is far from dead. The sting took out some major players, but others remain and continue to spread their wares through the numerous pay-per-install programs. However, it was a welcome respite. Typo squatting. So to generate more traffic to their fraudulent websites, cyber criminals constantly arrest intentionally misspelled domain names. The system takes advantage of users who mistakenly enter misspelled names of legitimate websites. This is technically called typo squatting. During September 2011, we observed a number of variations of misspelled youtube.com domains that redirected users to bogus survey websites. The redirected visitors were offered a chance to win their choices of high-end laptops, phones, and tablets if they completed the survey. And these surveys typically involve a collection of email and personal information which exposes the visitors to advertisements and offers. In this instance, users were duped into providing a mobile phone number that ended up being subscribed to an auto-renewing SMS subscription service which was charged to the user's phone bill. Though not new, typo squatting is certainly widespread, particularly on the major social media sites, in this case by imitating YouTube's look and feel, and the scammers piggyback on that brand's trust to make the rewards seem more genuine. So talking of social media scams, let's turn our attention to Facebook. So during 2011, Facebook has continued to be the subject of a wide variety of spam, scams, and malware. And what we have here is a few themes that we've actually noticed in the last 6 months. So one of the most common Facebook scams is to offer a free voucher or gift. In December, a Costco free gift card offer of $100 to all Facebook users, 800 million of them, not going to make money at doing that, spread very quickly. Clicking on the link loaded a page that first asked the user to share the advertisement in their profile, thus ensuring the scam spread even further. Next, the page redirected to a typical survey which users must complete to claim their prize. Needless to say, the victims did not get their $100 gift card. All they achieved was to earn money for the scammers, who got a commission for every person they duped into completing the survey. This type of scam is extremely common, and the new variants appearing. In the last few months, we've seen similar scams using JB Hi-Fi and Starbucks, another example you can see here on the slide. Some of them use Facebook events as a way of spreading the actual message. The Starbucks scam, in particular, led to a quiz which asked for a mobile phone number. A quick review of the fine print reveals the gotcha where mobile phone users are duped into signing up for a service, receiving 2 puzzles or questions per week at the cost of $5 each or $10 per week. Pretty expensive service. So those are good examples of the mass attacks that we see on the internet. Now we're going to shift our attention to some of the more targeted attacks that we see on the actual internet. Now this graphic here kind of tries to demonstrate the 2 types of attacks that we see on the internet today. You have the mass attacks, which are things like spam, bot infections, fake AV, social media scams that we just looked at, personal data loss, etc. Sort of mass things that, let's face it, you're just unlucky enough to come across on the actual internet. The other type of attack that certainly has been emerging in great numbers in 2011 are the targeted attacks. And there are 2 types of target attacks. There's server-side attacks and there's client-side attacks. The server-side attacks, that's things like website defacement, web application hacking, people getting into your external-facing website or your external-facing web applications. So that's a server-side attack. Good example of that might be Sony, the PlayStation Network at the beginning of 2011. On the other side, the client-side attacks, these are advanced persistent threats, phishing, spear phishing, blended attacks, zero-day malware, etc., etc. Good example of this would be the RSA attack that we also saw in 2011. So that's a client-side attack. So while these target attacks are not new, the serious growth in incidents during the second half of 2011 deserves a paper just in itself. So being concerned about being targeted in web attacks span countries as well as organizations. We're certainly now seeing organizations being less concerned about the mass attacks, but being critically concerned about these targeted attacks. In the first half of 2011 was dominated by targeted attacks that caused damage at both financial and military levels. For example, the PlayStation Network was taken down by malicious hackers for a considerable amount of time. This attack caused Sony a severe loss in profit and seriously impacted its brand reputation. Nearly 6 months ago, it was published that Lockheed Martin fell victim to a targeted attack. This case is pretty interesting as the attack involved 2 phases, which is also known as a multi-stage advanced persistent threat. The first stage was to breach RSA, the provider of secure ID, to get a hold of a token that can be used to access the Lockheed Martin network, which is secured by 2-factor authentication. And then the second phase was to access Lockheed Martin network itself. Perhaps the most notorious recent target attack involved Duku. While it's not yet clear who the intended primary target of the attack was, several things about the sophistication of the attack are already known. First, it used zero-day vulnerability, a true zero-day vulnerability in a Microsoft format parser, which was carried via a Word document. Second, the malware was installed as part of the attack was digitally signed. This increases the malware's capability to remain undetected for long periods of time. Finally, the malware self-deletes 36 days after it first runs. This increases the chances of the attack never to be detected. Being a targeted attack, the malware itself could have performed several malicious activities. In this case, its purpose was to collect information and send it to a remote server. One of the interesting features of the vulnerability used in this attack is the fact that the vulnerability itself is not about Microsoft Word. Instead, the vulnerability is about true type font passing. Microsoft Word was barely chosen as the vehicle for the malicious font. The attackers could have used other file formats that support embedding fonts, such as Adobe PDF. We also learned that the malware does not blindly replicate itself like worms usually do, and that the malware authors are learning from each other since the Duku code is claimed to contain many similarities to the Stuxnet code, even though it's claimed to originate from a different source. Not replicating means that the attack can stay under the radar for longer periods of time and possibly never be detected. Finally, the Duku payload uses a digitally signed executable file, which makes it far less suspicious than standard viruses. Stemming or faking digital certificates has been an important characteristic of targeted attacks. And we're going to cover more about digital certificates a little bit later on. So talking of increased use of fraudulent digital certificates, one of the major challenges of the internet today involves how to achieve trust between entities that need to communicate in a confidential way. One of the solutions to this is to use digital certificates that assert the online identity of entities taking part in web transactions. Websites present certificates to prove their identities. Similarly, files can be signed with a digital certificate to prove their origin, ensuring that that file is from Microsoft or it's from, Cisco or Symantec or whoever else. Operating systems, browsers, and other products allow the execution of software which is signed with valid digital certificates without warning the users or asking their permission. You've seen this inside Windows, for example. This is why cybercriminals are so eager to steal and fake digital certificates to allow the execution of malware on the victim's machine without being noticed. And indeed, although most certificate authorities issue certificates according to the standards and attempt to secure their infrastructures, several cases over the last few months demonstrate how fragile and deceptive this model could be. So in mid-July 2011, DigiNota, a Dutch internet trust provider running a CA or a certificate authority, detected an intrusion into its infrastructure, which resulted in the fraudulent issuance of hundreds of digital certificates for a number of domains, including Google, Yahoo, Facebook, and even for some intelligence agencies such as the CIA, the British MI6, and the Israeli Mossad. Google Road certificates were later used for committing man-in-the-middle attacks in Iran. DigiNota reported the breach blatantly on August 30th. In reaction, all the major browser vendors like Google, Mozilla, and Microsoft revoked the trust in the CA by removing it from the list of trusted root certificate authorities. And by the end of September, the company was declared bankrupt. DigiNota was not the only certificate authority whose reputation was badly damaged. A few months after this fiasco, a similar incident occurred with DigiCert CDN from Malaysia, an intermediate CA that's got its license to distribute certificates from Entrust, one of the most respected CAs in the world. DigiCert issued certificates with a weak 512-bit RSA keys, and according to Entrust, by doing so, they violated their agreement with Entrust. And by the beginning of November, Mozilla had posted on its blog, for example, that it was revoking its trust from DigiCert, and this was followed by Microsoft and Google. So again, you need to see where the browser vendors actually have to blatantly revoke the actual trust of these certificates. So it's very much a reaction to the actual issue. So a major issue here with fraudulent digital certificates. In early September, Duku was discovered, and this malware believed to relate to Stuxnet used a Windows zero-day vulnerability to infect vulnerable systems and to download malicious software. So those components, similar to Stuxnet, that was signed with stolen certificates from JMopron and Realtek, who were also signed with a stolen certificate, this time from C-Media, a company located in Taiwan. So the concern that arises from these incidents, which were published in the last 6 months and predicted by our security threat predictions in 2011, back in 2010, is that digital certificates can be dangerously deceptive. They should just be one of the several layers of protection, not the only layer of protection. So let's look at the variety of embedded malware now. So the battle between hackers and the information security industry is an age-old struggle that can easily be described as cat and mouse game. Hackers discover new vulnerabilities and attack techniques. The security industry responds with a solution, and hackers in turn find new ways to bypass the solution. The cycle goes on and on. These methods of bypassing security products and techniques are sometimes rooted in discovering new and previously unknown vulnerabilities, such as a zero-day vulnerability. More recently, in a concept that involves taking known vulnerabilities and complicating the attack vector, cybercriminals have added new layers and wrappers, more obfuscation, if you will, anything to make the attack more complex and invasive. Needless to say, the combination of the two methods is also becoming more common. For example, in the wild attack using a zero-day vulnerability in Adobe's Flash Player was compromised of a shockwave flash file named nbwm.swf. And that was part of a drive-by attack via a maladvertisement attack. The SWF file performed a just-in-time spray before loading an additional shockwave flash file using the load-based API, which allows, among other things, loading child shockwave flash files via action code script in the parent shockwave flash file. And you can see a snippet of that file here on the screen. So the file loaded from within this shockwave flash file contained the actual vulnerability. So the file that actually has the vulnerability is several layers down within these files, and this is what makes it very difficult to detect the vulnerability itself in a security product. Because if you're only looking at the parent file, it would require a fairly deep level of understanding of the file and action script to uncover those embedded files within the actual parent file. So both the shellcode and the binary data from which the child shockwave flash file is to be created are stored in strings, and only after the just-in-time spray is performed, load bytes is used to take that local string and load its binary data, thus turning a string of hex characters into the child shockwave flash file, and this is how the infection happens. In those rare cases where a machine does not have a flash player installed, hackers have found a new solution. We have seen more samples where a compressed flash file was embedded within a PDF file. PDF readers in general, and Adobe Reader in particular, are also commonly installed on users' machines, and many documents shared across the internet are delivered in the form of these PDF files. Other than the obvious attempt to find vulnerabilities in PDF files, vulnerabilities in shockwave flash files work just as well. Adobe Reader, Acrobat Reader has support for flash files built into it, which means that a flash file embedded within a PDF can be executed regardless of whether Adobe's Flash Player is actually installed on the machine. So as web browsers increase their levels of security and users become more aware of the dangers of browser attacks, hackers are turning to another front for which awareness is significantly lower and security is still a work in progress. With malware hiding behind layers of various technologies, digging to detect it within one seemingly innocent document is not a simple task, and constantly requires security products that can support all these technologies as well as their integration with one another. And this is why content controls are becoming such an important part of malware detection. And certainly, as you can imagine, this is an area of great focus for M86's security products, and we pride ourselves on leading the market in the ability to detect these sorts of attacks. So let's turn our attention now to exploit kits. So the use of exploit kits increases rapidly every year. Today, most cyber criminals use at least one exploit kit as part of an attack. And as previously mentioned, the Blackhole exploit kit became the most common exploit kit among cyber criminals in the second half of 2011. Even the Phoenix exploit kit, which was on the 2010 Stop Exploit Kits list, barely appears in 2011 compared to Blackhole. One of the most significant advantages of the Blackhole exploit kit over its competitors is the frequency of updating. And we think this is one of the major reasons why it has become so popular. So, for example, the vulnerability Oracle Java Applet Rhino Script Engine Remote Code Execution, a 0-day vulnerability that was published at the end of November, was exploited a few days later in the wild by the Blackhole exploit kit. And we have a blog post that actually shows more details of that particular incident. So within days, the Blackhole exploit kit operators were able to get that new vulnerability into their kit, and of course, with it being so fresh, it was very successful for the actual cyber criminals. So the Blackhole exploit kit, unlike other exploit kits, added the 0-day to its package very quickly. And as you can see from the panel on the screen here, cyber criminals in the attack deactivated the PDF and browser exploits and switched to use only Java exploits. The latest Java exploits use design vulnerabilities, unlike browsers and PDF exploits that usually use heap spray and buffer overflow techniques. Moreover, vulnerabilities in Java as well as PDF are cross-platform that can work on every operating system. Once the user's PC runs a vulnerable Java application, the severity of successful exploitation is very high. Something else the Blackhole exploit kit is actually doing is presenting a new technique to identify the user's application versions before exploitation. They use a free JavaScript library, and the script identifies the version of each application installed on the user machine without executing the actual PDF, Flash, or Java exploit. This way, exploits are successful as long as the machine is vulnerable, but detection of the exploits by security vendors becomes even harder. Another exploit kit that could be found on the 2010 top exploits list was the Phoenix exploit kit. And the Phoenix exploit kit does not contain the latest Java vulnerability, but one of the things that's now doing is using inbuilt A/B testing to work out how successful the actual vulnerabilities within the actual exploit actually are. And when the security vendors are actually now updating their security products and detecting the attacker's malware more often. And when a particular piece of malware becomes less successful, then they swap to another piece of malware, and they've kind of got that built-in testing to work out when they should make that decision. So every few months, security vendors are challenged with a new level of sophistication built into these exploit kits. And given their prevalence, it is critical for security vendors to keep up with these techniques. So it's critical that security vendors know exactly how these exploit kits are operating and what all the latest features are to ensure that we're able to keep up and detect their usage. So let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about attacks that targeted national critical infrastructure. And we start off this by thinking about how it might have all started with Stuxnet. So much of this report covers various mass attacks by cybercriminals, including spam, phishing, and banking trojans for personal gain. The other type of threats are targeted attacks carried out against commercial organizations as well as governments and infrastructures. The original definition and use of APTs, or an advanced persistent threat, was for traditional espionage attacks, even before computers existed. And that has now evolved into cyber terrorism and even cyber warfare. Stuxnet was a well-publicized example of an APT. In that case, Iran's nuclear ambitions were one of the higher-profile targets, but many countries and organizations have also been infected by this particularly advanced piece of malware. Stuxnet was interesting for several reasons. First, the initial infection was not through the internet. The equipment targeted was not directly connected to the internet. And secondly, while in this example, one of the goals was to delay Iran's nuclear program, it's important to consider what could have been done. During the second half of 2011, our security labs saw several attacks, although two were of particular interest. The first one occurred against the computers controlling the United States drone fleet. You can see a screenshot here of the actual drone operators and the machines they actually use. So these machines were infected with a virus, and the virus included a keylogger as its payload and is suspected to be infiltrated through the use of these machines for unauthorized internet gaming. The virus was persistent and kept on coming back even after being wiped, and eventually it took the complete erasure of the hard drives to beat the actual virus. Initially, little was known about the virus, but further investigation led to the belief that it had been unintentionally installed through an online gaming session, perhaps not completely targeted at those drone controlling machines. And that infection affected both unclassified and classified computers. In the past, we've seen similar attacks involving US satellites, where the intruders were trying to infiltrate the command and control systems of the satellite. These examples of private and public networks being breached and compromised are troubling. The second attack had many features in common with the original Stuxnet attack, where a city's infrastructure was hacked through its SCADA, or the Siemens Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition Systems, which control infrastructure like water pumping stations, sewage, lake spoil gates, and so on. The Illinois Statewide Terrorism Intelligence Center recently published a report stating that attackers had attacked their SCADA systems of a city water facility in Springfield, Illinois. Although it should be noted that the Department of Homeland Security later said the attack did not happen. Regardless of what actually happened, this shows that citywide infrastructure is vulnerable to attack, with the increasing automation of connectivity of electricity, natural gas, and water to increase operational efficiency. So what do we need to learn from these attacks, and what should we be doing about them? So these attacks show that the intended use of national infrastructure and the military infrastructure cannot be circumvented for unauthorized activities such as online gaming, as this easily impacts the security of classified or protected computers. We also need to fully understand the infrastructure that is being built, make sure it is simple as possible to follow, and perhaps not rely totally on security controls that could easily be circumvented by common misconfiguration, such as a VLAN assignment. As part of this, we should also revisit whether certain systems do actually need to be connected to the internet. Yes, there are benefits, but do these outweigh the security concerns, and can those concerns be mitigated? Are we taking all the security precautions available? Sure, perhaps control data protected to a drone, for example, but if the data stream coming back from a drone is not encrypted, then it could be intercepted. While only a select group of IT professionals work in the industries and in positions that can help take action in this area, the more people that are aware of these vulnerabilities and take their own precautions, then the less the overall impact such an attack might actually have. So with that, let's move on to some of the recommendations that we have for administrators, website owners, and end users. So in terms of administrators, and we'll get a copy of these slides out to you after the actual webinar, keep any PC and server software meticulously updated with the latest security patches from the relevant vendors, including any installed third-party software. Remove any unnecessary third-party software. Disable any risky and unnecessary features, such as the execution of JavaScript code within PDF files, execution of macros and Microsoft Office files, etc. Many of these features can be disabled via group policy. Use multi-layer defense protection. Install a firewall, spam filter, secure web gateway, and endpoint antivirus. Make sure to configure them according to your security policy requirements. Periodically review your security policy and configuration. Maintain a strong password policy. Restrict dangerous email attachments like EXEs, BATs, PIFs, SCRs, and command file types. How many people inside your organization actually need to receive emails with these types of attachments? Have a policy regarding how removable media can be inserted, if at all. USB drives are an effective method for delivering malware, especially for targeted attacks. Educate your staff. Social engineering techniques often circumvent protection technologies. In particular, educate your users to pay attention to browser warnings, particularly those regarding digital certificates. And finally, use certificate revocation lists, or CRLs, to configure your security products to deploy these revocation lists. Check your website regularly for unexpected or modified content. Use strong administrative passwords and regularly change them. Use the latest versions of all the software running on your web servers, and do penetration testing before the upgrade of your web content. Finally, for end users, keep all software, including browser plugins, up to date. Be wary of social media notifications. Check links by hovering your mouse over them. If they're a short URL, be highly suspicious. Be suspicious of everything on Facebook or other social media sites that promise a reward. If it's too good, it's probably not true. And use a well-known, up-to-date antivirus product, and use a non-administrator account for normal activity. This will greatly limit what malware can do if it attempts to execute on your actual computer. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and for attending our webinar today. I hope that has been useful to you all. And what we'll do now is we'll pause for any outstanding questions. You'll be getting a link to the actual slides, a link to the recording, and also a link to the actual Security Labs report, which is being released tomorrow morning. So you lucky folks have been the first to actually see it. So I hope that was interesting. Now we'll pause for any questions. And Manny, I can see them through the Q&A panel, so I'll just scan through and see what we've got available here. So people are asking for the slides, so we'll make a copy of the slides available to you, as well as a recording of this webinar. Some thumbs up there for the M86 Secure Web Gateway. Thank you very much. Quick point there that the slide, the Blackhole exploit kit slide, was actually in Russian, so you don't know what it's saying. Actually, that's a good point. I guess we look at these exploit kits on a regular basis. So I guess we kind of, even though I don't understand Russian, I kind of, we understand what all the different sections are. So in the future, perhaps we'll definitely, provide some translation of what the actual screenshot is actually saying. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you very much. Good suggestion here from attendee. Don't exclude C-level execs from malware scans policies ever. Yeah, that certainly in my experience with targeted attacks, targeted attacks into organizations are typically at a certain group of people, and certainly the C-level execs are the primary ones that they're targeted towards. So if anything, security controls, security scans, etc., should be even more prevalent on those types of, make it consistent across everybody. Definitely, as Jake's suggested there, definitely don't exclude C-level execs ever. Another question here, do I anticipate a rival exploit kit gaining share against Blackhole anytime soon? Well, you can see just in those 6 months, the change between the first half of the year and the second half of the year, major difference there in the actual makeup there of the exploit kits. Blackhole has a massive lead right now, but certainly, you know, it could definitely change. There could be another exploit kit that comes up and offers even better features than what Blackhole has today. Although you've got to also remember that the cyber criminals buy these exploit kits, so you typically, you know, just because you know, there's a new version of Microsoft Word comes up, it doesn't necessarily mean you can move away from, you know, the Apple version, for example. So you're not constantly moving between these exploit kits. You basically buy one, hope you've made the right decision, and stick with it for a while. So we think that's why Blackhole has really taken off. But certainly, you know, it is possible for another exploit kit to come along. What I think could actually change in the future is when these exploit kits actually start heading up towards the cloud. So we've already talked about that. And I think if, you know, one exploit kit does that very successfully, and several have kind of been playing in this area already, as we've previously talked about, you know, that could be a impact against the Blackhole dominance that we see right now. Another question here, what are your thoughts on software that blocks unknown executables? Certainly a good thing to do. You know, application whitelisting from companies like Bit9. I have great respect for that type of technology. I think it's another security layer. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, as IT security professionals, you know, we need to think about these different layers and work out which ones add sense. And, you know, we all have a set budget. I mean, we don't have unlimited security budgets. So we need to try and work out, you know, where is the best place to spend my money? And, you know, what solutions should we be buying, you know, for my budget? And, you know, perhaps that's a topic of a book that maybe I should write. But certainly, you know, I certainly have a lot of respect for application whitelisting. I think it's a good layer. But then again, you need to review all the layers you've got and work out which ones are providing you the most, you know, most benefit. Another question here, can we email questions after we review the slides? Yes, we've got several different ways of contacting us. So Manny's email address, I think, is on the meeting invite, so you feel free to email questions into him, or you can follow us through Twitter and LinkedIn, etc., and send us messages that way. Or, of course, you know, feel free to contact any of your local M86 reps or myself directly. No problem there at all. Final question I've got on the list at the moment, with companies allowing users to use their personal devices to access company information, what top 3 pieces of advice would you give to end users? Good question. So you know, typically what we're seeing there is BYOD, bring your own device. And this is where, you know, employees bring in their iPads or their Android tablets or even their phones, you know, to a lesser extent, but certainly very popular. Bring them into your network and synchronize the email to them, and you know, use them to store information on the actual device. And that really, you know, introduces a big conundrum for a lot of organizations. I think BYOD it's a trend that's here to stay, and we need to embrace it, not ignore it. But one thing I would recommend straight away is be very careful about what information you allow them to sync to the device. Now think about, why are they bringing the device into your network? They want to bring it in so they can maybe, you know, do what I do. I bring my iPad in and connect to Pandora and listen to that, you know, at my desk during the day, which means I just need a web connection, you know, an internet connection to get to Pandora. Do I really need to access any of my organization applications? Do I really need to synchronize my corporate email, you know, to those sorts of devices? There's, you know, interesting technologies starting to come onto the market now to allow you to control those sorts of things. One interesting thing that I've been looking at lately is a company called Let Mobile out of Israel, and they allow you to not set up an email synchronization, but it's kind of more of a remote representation of the email, you know, application looking exactly the same as it normally does on an iPad, but it's actually not locally stored on the iPad. So, you know, those sorts of technologies, I think, are emerging, and they'll definitely help us in the future. But in terms of the top 3 pieces of advice, so the first one would be allow it to happen. but make sure you have a written policy that clearly lays out exactly what they can do and what they can't do, and carefully consider what are you going to allow them to access. Giving them an internet connection, maybe even through the guest network, guest wireless network. That's a great way to go if that's all they really need to do. What's the business justification of them, synchronizing email on their iPad? Because if they're synchronizing email on their iPad, they've now got corporate company information on that device. So then you need to start considering how you're going to protect that device. Are they going to allow you access to their remote wipe and kill technologies? Are you going to be able to install a remote management client on that device? Pretty difficult when it's their own personal devices. So we're actually right in the middle of writing a white paper on exactly this topic. So perhaps I should hurry up and get that finished, and we'll get it published up to the M86 website, and you can use that for more information. Another question here, looking forward to the SWG agent for mobile devices, particularly the Android platform. I'm aware of the policies available already, but I'm not aware of a mobile agent to force a path the users would follow when browsing. So if it's so what we can actually do at the moment is on the SWG, and I apologize for the product discussion here, but just going to answer this gentleman's question, is basically the SWG, and basically also the web filter, by the way, can support BYOD. So it's able to support when people bring their personal devices onto your company network. What we're able to do in the SWG, for example, is we're able to basically look for a user agent string, which all browsers have, and we're able to recognize when it's a mobile platform browser, maybe Safari running on an iPad or Google running on an Android device or something like that, Chrome, should I say. And if we recognize as one of those browsers, then we can actually divert to basic authentication, which obviously brings up a username, password screen on their device to allow them to authorize them to access the internet. So now we know who the actual user is, and we can actually pass through the correct policy for that actual user. Turn on IP caching, so you remember that IP address username combination perhaps every day in case IP addresses change, etc. So that's what we're able to do already. On the web filter, we're able to recognize. We use Tier 3 authentication. If Tier 3 authentication fails, which it will do obviously on a mobile platform device, then we divert back to a basic authentication type of capability, very similar to what we do in the SWG. So we support now the ability to define the user's browsing policy to those devices. What we don't support right now is the ability to skew those devices when they're away from your network. So we can't, there's no agent to load on that device to control it and manage it, enforce policies, etc., when it's at Starbucks or at their local or even at their home, internet connection or something like that. And that's currently what we're working on for those sorts of devices. So we support BYOD, we support the ability to protect the device, control the device when it's on your network behind the SWG or the web filter. And what we're working on in the future is a client to load on that device, maybe it's an organization-supplied device at that stage, to enforce those same policies when it's at home or at public Wi-Fi. So that's what we're able to do now, and that's actually also part of the white paper that I'm working on. So it looks like I've got a couple of big votes there to hurry up and finish that white paper. Another question here, what are my feelings around cloud storage such as iCloud, SkyDrive, etc., as it pertains to a corporate setting? Well, yeah, this is a good question. Certainly, these cloud storage technologies, I really think you need to investigate them carefully. Pardon me. They all have, pretty good security. Let's face it, if someone like iCloud or Dropbox or SkyDrive or someone like that, had a major security incident, that would pretty much be the end of that company. So, they take security pretty seriously, some better than others. Perhaps the iClouds, the SkyDrives, the Dropboxes, etc., are commonly, I think, more used for personal data than corporate data. So, are they more likely to be attacked by a targeted attack? Probably not. You could debate that point. Whereas other services that specialize in cloud storage for corporate data, because they specialize in corporate data and not personal data, they might be more susceptible or more of a enticing target for the attackers. feelings about cloud storage in general is, it is a very economic way of storing data with, archiving and also, offline file storage, and it's a great way to access it. I'm a avid lover of Dropbox, for example, but you also got to think about the types of documents and the content you're storing within it, and how would you feel about, the compromise of that sort of information. Same security decision we have to make if we're keeping, data down at branch offices or, at external data centers. Just got to take the same precautions there with cloud storage. But cloud storage is here to stay. It's going to get a lot more easier to use, a lot more pervasive in our environments. And, instead of saying no and ignoring it, I certainly think it's something that, you need to start looking at and learning about. One of the great ways, actually, that I got to learn more about these sorts of subjects is I actually took the CCSK, the Cloud Security Alliance's certification. It's not very expensive to do. I think it's like $200. And I took and passed that certification, and in studying for the certification, it taught me a lot around the actual policies and requirements that we need to be looking for, for these cloud-type products. So, highly recommend that certification. That the Cloud Security Alliance do a lot of great work in this area, and it's also a great resource for research and advice and policies and all that sort of stuff. So, and it's all free. It's it's a great service. So certainly, I encourage you to go that way. All right. Well, that looks like we've exhausted all your questions, which is fantastic. But if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to send them through. So if you have any questions or anything like that, please don't hesitate to type them into the Q&A panel.